Read? Well, welcome to Hoopla on the Hudson. That was John Philip Sousa's The Liberty Bell March, correct? And that's just the beginning of our celebration today. My name is Mark Cheshire, and we're here today to celebrate the Croton's part of the Hudson Fulton Champlain Quadricentennial. And this year we're celebrating three important events: the 400th anniversary of Henry Hudson's discovery of the Hudson River, Champlain's discovery that same year from the north of the lake that bears his name today, and the 200th anniversary of Robert Fulton's development of the first successful steamboat. But the Quadricentennial is more than just those events. It's also about making the public aware of the rich cultural history, the history of New York State, and New York State's natural resources. So today, we're going to be celebrating the rich history, culture, and natural resources of Croton. And before we start, we're going to have the Star-Spangled Banner. First of all, in this room, we have paintings and sculpture inspired by the Hudson River. It's all by local artists. This is going to be up, I think, for at least another month. In the main room of the library, there's a wonderful exhibit of postcards of parade floats that were created for the 1909 Hudson Fulton celebration. And the show has the postcards showing those floats, as well as other postcards that were produced during that period and other memorabilia, so definitely take a look. Our first presentation today is by Carl Oshner, who's going to talk about what happened in New York and around the world in 1909 when the first Hudson Fulton celebration was held. Carl was a history teacher in the Ossining school system for many years. There are lots of students who say that he inspired their love of history. He's currently the president of Croton Friends of History, which sponsors lectures and other events on a wide variety of topics. He's also started a new group called the Harmon Deli Chocolate Chip Cookie Appreciation Society, which are all invited to join.
And you're a member?
Yes, I'm a member. It's a growing organization, although I really should say the waistlines of the members have been growing. Carl founded it. So please welcome Carl.
Thank you all for coming. Just terrific. First, before I get into the year 1909, I just wanted to pay a brief homage to Lincoln Diamond, for those of you who knew him and those of you who did not. Over the past 10 years, I had the pleasure of being taught by, mentored by, and doing lectures with Link, who's now living with his lovely wife Joan in Williamstown, Massachusetts, and he had wanted so badly to be here today, but health issues did not allow that to happen. So I just wanted to thank Link for everything, and also our Hoopla on the Hudson, Link's latest book, Hoopla on the Hudson, tell you briefly about that. And he was generous enough to say to us, please use Hoopla for your theme today here in Groningen-on-Hudson. In the summer of 1909, a young Dutch freelance reporter for the New Rotterdam Courant, Europe's leading financial daily, arrived in New York City to cover the upcoming Hudson Fulton celebration. Taking temporary position as a Wall Street clerk to keep himself economically afloat, Rudolph Damiant, Lincoln's father, proceeded to immerse himself in the colorful and buoyant life of the world's great magnet city. The start of September 1909, he filed the first of 14 cabled articles, all of which earned a place on the newspaper's front page. In 2003, some 94 years after the event, Link obtained the articles, translated them, and with an illuminating and engaging commentary on the city in 1909 into his book, Hoopla on the Hudson. As I said, Link was looking forward to being here, and that's not possible, but I will email him. In fact, I may call him tomorrow morning and just say that everything went well and we thank him. Now, as part of my piece for today, I wondered what was going on in the world and in the United States in the year 1909. So here's a brief outline. Besides the Hudson River celebration, what was happening in America almost a decade into the new century? Severe financial panics had followed the Civil War. The nation had not yet fully recovered from the sink and stink of social and economic corruption, characterized by Mark Twain, who dubbed it the Gilded Age. After shameful international delays, the 1890s saw the ending of the infamous international African slave trade. It had been both shameful and immoral. In the world's affected areas, slaves' muscle power was slowly being replaced by canals, steamboats, railways, and internal combustion engines, all tied together by almost miraculous advances in communications. People were living in a whirlwind of change. The United States was now a country with 90 million people. 16 million had swarmed from abroad just between 1900 and 1909. By 1900, New York had overtaken Greater London as the most populous city in the world. Nothing but glory days lay ahead. The United States Navy's Great White Fleet triumphantly returned from showing our flag to nations around the world. The last American soldiers were wrapping up their long military occupation of Cuba. For the last 5 years, we had been steam shoveling away at our new and improved design for the Panama Canal, with 5 more years of difficult construction on this symbol of early 20th century civil engineering, which still lay ahead. Admiral Robert Peary and Dr. Frederick Cook and their sarcastic supporters were stepping up a bitter war of accusations as to which man had been the first to set foot on the North Pole. At the same time in Antarctica, Ernest Shackleton and his expedition reached within 97 miles of the South Pole before turning back. Conservative Republican William Howard Taft of Ohio was in his first year in the White House. The new president's unusual obesity forced the White House plumbers to design and build a special oversized bathtub. Taft had replaced Theodore Roosevelt, who was now leading a Smithsonian charge killing elephants in Kenya, Africa. In this single colorful year of 1909, small-town America, like Croton, was enjoying a period of relative prosperity. The Dow Jones stock average rewarded investors with an overall gain for the entire year of 12.9 points. The United States Senate submitted the 16th constitutional amendment to the 46 states to put into law an annual tax on American personal income. Less than half the nation possessed even a grade school education. Child labor in factories across the nation was still present. Near the hamlet of Cherry in southern Illinois, 259 miners were killed in a coal mine explosion. Almost anticipating the arrival of Prohibition, East Coast hop growing was nearly wiped out by a devastating blue mold epidemic. Orville Wright completed a 1-hour endurance record on his plane. Another Wright, Frank Lloyd, the architect, designed and built Chicago's landmark Robie House. And an electronic message was flashed from New York to Chicago without wires. Henry Ford's Detroit assembly line produced more than 19,000 Model Ts, selling at $825 each. None had a self-starter. You cranked and occasionally broke your arm. All Ford automobiles were painted black. The first plastic, named Bakelite by its inventor Leo Baekeland, popped out of its thermostatic mold. The underground and underwater New York City subway system, already the largest in the world, now linked 3 of Greater New York's 5 consolidated boroughs. The city was close to completing a major addition to its fabulous Croton water supply, a huge new reservoir in the Catskill Mountains with 130-mile-long Ashokan Aqueduct, which delivered more than 1 billion gallons of drinking water to the city every day. 2 grand new bridges, the Williamsburg and the Queensboro, were opened to span the East River. But less than a dozen artists in the so-called Ashcan School of Contemporary American Painting continued to increase their public recognition and acceptance through small group exhibitions. GE launched the electric toaster. Wintergreen won the Kentucky Derby. W.C. Handy composed the Memphis Blues. The NAACP was formed as a spearhead to spearhead the struggle for American civil rights, African American civil rights. The Red Cross sold its first sheet of Christmas seals to combat tuberculosis. And as the Hudson River celebration came to an end, Pittsburgh beat Detroit in the 6th annual Baseball World Series, 4 games to 3. Only the bitterest fortune teller could have suggested that the 1909 celebration would be the last of such international events until Chicago's 1933 World's Fair. In less than 5 years, the so-called civilized nations of the world would plunge much of the globe into a brutal war that would result in the death of 14 million people. Jane Beller, born and bred Crotonite. Jane is a New York-based actress. Her 2 favorite spots in the world are on the banks of the River Seine, facing the derriere of Notre Dame, and sitting on the jetty at our very own Silver Lake, where she is. Today she takes a look back, a cute look back, the year 1909, here in Croton. Jane.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you here today. So I have a list of fabulous factoids at my fingertips, and they all pertain to the years 1900 to 1909 in our beloved Croton on the Hudson. Actually, the incorporation of our village became official in the year 1909, and during these years, Clifford B. Harmon and his relative Charles Wood began selling lots locally on 500 acres of land that they purchased from the Van Cortlandt estate. Their hope was to establish a community where artists, musicians, and singers could live and gather to share their creative energy in a suburban atmosphere. From the looks of this, I think they succeeded quite well. The first kindergarten was organized during this time. The New York Central Railroad announced the construction of a new station at Harmon on the Hudson. This guy's got quite an ego, I have to say, Mr. Harmon. The average striped bass weighed in at about 26 pounds, which is far larger than today, except for Mark Safranco's was about 60 pounds this summer.
It was up there.
Yes, I immediately thought of Indian Point. A hobo who was arrested on the railroad tracks was actually found to escape from the Croton jail with a piece of long wire. Sing Sing it obviously wasn't. So there's arts, there's travel, there's intrigue. It's all part of Croton's heritage. So basically, to spice things up, I decided I would find out how much you guys know about Croton's past, considering the people in the room, you'll probably know a lot. So it's time to play Carl's Croton Fabulous Factoids Quiz. Okay? I'm going to start with a question and give you 3 possible answers, and then afterwards I want you to put your hand up for the one that you think is right. And so this is a pop quiz for you guys, and it won't count in your final grade, so don't worry about it. Okay, number 1, the first police what were ordered for the department? The first police blank were ordered for the department. A, guns. B, helmets with headlights. C, badges. So did they order guns? A, raise any hands for the guns. B, helmets with headlights. C, badges. Dang, people are smart. Okay. Why was the National Guard brought in? A, The Osborne Boat Club at the foot of Grand Street near Senasqua Park was on fire. B, the workers at the dam went on strike. Or C, 2 cases of smallpox were reported at the Underhill Brickyards on Croton Point. So was the National Guard brought in because A, the boat club was on fire? B, the workers at the dam went on strike? I think you've educated them well. C, there was smallpox at Croton Point. Well, just so you know, it was the dam, but the Osborne Boat Club did burn down. They just didn't bring in the National Guard, and there was smallpox on Croton Point. Okay, number 3, a referendum was passed for the development of blank. A referendum was passed for the development of blank. A, a village dock on the Hudson River. B, a viable business district in the Upper Village. C, a village water supply. So was it A, a dock? B, a viable business district. Sorry about that, I had to throw that in. Or C, a village water supply. Absolutely. Okay, a local chapter of what was organized? A, the American Red Cross. B, the Salvation Army. Or C, the industrial workers of the world known as the Wobblies. A, the American Red Cross. B, the Salvation Army. Or C, the Wobblies. Oh, look at that audience. It was actually the American Red Cross. How do you like that? But my grandfather was a wobbly. That's why I threw it in there. Actually, the mayor got it right. He was the only one.
My grandmother was involved.
The former mayor, who's always the mayor in my mind, so sorry, but. 5, whose salary was $100? A, the chief of police, B, the village mayor, or C, the train conductors. $100 a year. The chief of police, A year. C, the village mayor, the village mayor. Or C, the train conductors. Absolutely, it was the train conductors. The village mayor made $70 a year. The truant officer at the school was also the A, janitor, B, the dog catcher, or C, the social worker. A, the janitor, B, the dog catcher, C, the social worker. Haha, I trumped you. It was the janitor. I like the dog catcher. I thought that was good. Okay, who rode through the village on horseback on his way to Peekskill? Who rode through the village on horseback on his way to Peekskill? A, William H. Taft. B, Theodore Roosevelt. Or C, the Lone Ranger. A, William H. Taft. B, Theodore Roosevelt. You kind of ruined that one for me because I didn't know how obese he was. Or C, the Lone Ranger. It was Theodore Roosevelt. The duck pond was called A, the ice pond, B, the skating pond, or C, the duck pond. The duck pond was called A, the ice pond, B, the skating pond, or C, the duck pond. It was actually A, the ice pond, because the ice was cut into chunks and it was used by local residents to in their kitchen ice boxes. Today I think it looks more like superfood, or a green drink you could drink in the morning. I'm not getting a lot of ice out of that one. 10, who did Clifford Harmon marry and subsequently divorce? A, Louise Adele Cleveland, B, Louise Adele Benedict, or C, Sarah Bernhardt? A, Louise Adele Cleveland, B, Louise Adele Benedict, or C, Sarah Bernhardt? It was B, Louise Adele Benedict. Yeah, that was her, she married that Boulevard guy afterwards. Okay, before I hit you with some fill-in-the-blanks questions, here's a bit more about Clifford Harmon. He earned a place among early amateur balloonists by establishing an altitude record of 16,000 feet and remained aloft 48 hours and 26 minutes, which stood as an American record till 1923. Also by 1909, the Mikado Inn, and the Playhouse at Deep Hole on the banks of the Croton River were opened for business. I would have loved to have been there.
Okay, next up is Tim Auld. Tim has been singing and acting since the age of 12, and among other things, he is the only person who is a member of both the Screen Actors Guild and the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. So he's going to be singing a Scottish folk song, Bonnie Doon, which was Robert Fulton's favorite song, and an American folk song, Bright Mohawk Valley. So please welcome our singing engineer, Tim Auld.
2 songs I'm going to do today.
evolved at a time when choruses did not exist. Nobody had decided, well, let's break up this melody with something different in the middle. So it's kind of the same melody all the way through. And the other thing I find about pre-18th century and before folk songs, folk lyrics, is they are either mildly melancholy or deeply depressing. They just didn't seem to be inspired to write about happiness at all. The first song was Robert Fulton's favorite song. It's a lyric that was set by Robert Burns to a traditional Scottish melody. This shirt, it figures the last day of the season that I could get away wearing it, so I'm sorry that you had to be subjected to it. The song is called Bonnie Doon. Ye banks and braes of Bonnie Doon, how can ye bloom sae fresh and fair? How can ye chant, ye little birds, when I'm sae weary, full of care? You'll break my heart, you warbling birds, that wanton through the flowering thorn. Ye mind me, oh, departed joys, departed ne'er to return. Oft I have roved by Bonnie Doon to see the rose and woodbine twine, and like a bird sings of its love, so fondly say did I, oh my. With lightsome heart I put a rose full sweet upon the flowering tree, but my false lover stole my rose, and she left the thorn with me. So that was supposed to be. Pretty good authority, that was Robert Fulton's favorite song. It says in the program that I am going to, I could probably put my glasses on and be able to see these lyrics. It says I'm going to sing a song called Bright Mohawk Valley. Cute story, boring song. The story is it is a song that's associated with the American West called Red River Valley, but it was brought there from the Mohawk Valley in New York. Stupid, boring song. Not going to changed my mind. I'm going to do a song that is also an 18th century folk song. It's English. And these songs came over here. This song was popular in the 18th century in this area as a song called The Unfortunate Rake. And folk songs go through a process, I guess you'd call it. I heard Arlo Guthrie told a story about he said his father stole a lot of songs because he would take a tune of somebody else's and put his own words to it, or take words of somebody else's and put a tune to it, or just take a song and change it a little bit and make it his own. And Arlo said that always worried him until Pete Seeger came along and renamed that the folk process, and then everything. So in the 18th century, this song was called The Unfortunate Rake. It evolved into the late 19th and early 20th century into a song that just about everybody recorded, but the man who came to mind in relation to the Hudson River was a guy who lived by the Hudson River for the vast majority of his life. He loved the Hudson River. He was known as the mayor of McDougal Street. His name was Dave Van Ronk. And he used to do this song quite a bit. So. Well, it was down in old Joe's barroom at the corner by the square. The drinks were served as usual, and the usual crowd was there. Now on my left stood Big Joe McKinney. His eyes was bloodshot red, and as he looked at the gang around him, these were the very words he said. I went down to the St. James Infirmary. I saw my baby there, laying out on a long white table, so hitched to a rubber-tired hack. 7 girls are going to the graveyard. 8 but 6 of them are coming back. When I die, just bury me in my high-top Stetson hat. Place a $20 gold piece on my watch chain to let the Lord know I died standing pat. I want 6 crap shooters for my pallbearers, a chorus girl to sing me a song, and put a red-hot jazz band playing at my head just to raise hell as we go along. Well, now you've heard my story. I'll take another shot of booze, and if anyone here should ask you, I got the gambler's blues.
Next, we're going to welcome Bob Elliott. Bob was the former mayor of Croton. He was mayor from 1991 to 2005. He's been involved in a wide variety of organizations, including historic river towns, which he founded, the New York Main Street Alliance, Hudson Valley Greenway Council, and the Hudson River Foundation. Until very recently, he was the Deputy Secretary of State for the state of New York. And Bob is going to talk about Croton Landing and the River Walk and the future of public access on the Hudson River.
Now he tells me what I'm supposed to talk about. He did say I was to give you 5 minutes of how the current waterfront, Croton Landing, came about. And there's hardly a person in this room that wasn't involved in that to a large extent. And there's hardly anybody here that I could probably tell anything new about. But I'll give it a shot. And I can't single everybody out in the room, but I'd be remiss if I didn't and at least mention a couple of people that we served with on the board. Not the least of which was Ann Spud O'Connor, who was sorely missed. We missed Spud, but had a lot to do with these things. And Jesse, who has not lost his touch on the piano, which was just wonderful walking in here. And of course, Leo and Ann Galali, who had so much to do with everything good in this village. And many of you served on all sorts of committees and whatnot, so I really can't mention everybody, but thank you all for all the work that you've done in the village and on the waterfront. Does everybody know that from the northern tip of what's now called Croton Landing, you can walk or bike or hike all the way to New York City? Now, I'm not sure that everybody is aware that that whole thing is just a small piece of a much larger system. And if we're talking about the waterfront as it is now today, we can't go too far back in history, we really need to start, and it's too bad that he's not here, we have to start with my father. My father, another Bob Elliott, and Jim Lacano, who was mayor back in the 50s, actually began this. Jim was a very senior official at the New York Central Railroad, and what's now Sinasquo was originally New York Central Railroad property. And my father, you probably all go to jail today for doing these things, but my father engineered the sale of that property when he was Recreation Commissioner. We had a different form of government in those days where people served as commissioners and actually ran things. And it goes back to that. And I will say that I don't know how many cows actually went under that underpass because there wasn't much of a pasture. And as I look around the room, there's Joel and Richie. We were kids when this all occurred. And if you remember, that was a little bit of a swampy area that was there. And there was a deli on the other side of the railroad tracks that would sell beer to miners. That's why Rich ultimately came about. And we used to drink our beer out there. And people who lived in that area, which was then known as the dock, would actually build little camps out there. And Rich, do you remember what we called that area?
Where the sewer emptied in and we went crabbing?
The Riviera. It's actually known as, the local residents called it the Riviera. And when we were kids, this is the Hudson River crawl, and you can imagine what were pushing away in front of us. But to get to where we are today, you really, all these things are really very integrated. And we wouldn't have the waterfront today if we hadn't actually closed the landfill and capped the landfill. And equally important was the cleanup, and many of you may not be aware of this. We did in Croton the largest PCB cleanup before they started on the Hudson. There was a lake, a lagoon, which is behind where Discovery Cove is now, of PCBs and an oily substance, which was quite a feat to clean up, and there's a long stories that go with all of that. But I like to describe the Croton Landing as it was a dozen projects with a dozen partners with about $12 million. Actually, it was more projects than that and more money than that in the long run. But it didn't come out necessarily out of all of our pockets to do that. We were running all of these projects pretty nearly simultaneously through the early 90s. And it began with actually, there was a project of raising all the bridges over the railroad. This was for General Motors. I remember everybody who remembers that. So they raised all the pedestrian bridges and bridges that went over them, and they didn't raise them high enough. And then they had to raise them again to get these cars to go down to General Motors. And then, of course, what did General Motors do? Close the plant. But there was a pedestrian bridge that went almost all the way to the waterfront that came down in those days. And there's a couple people here who were on the board at the time. We forced the state to build a pedestrian way over the railroad tracks and over the expressway to the waterfront. Now, it's not anything architecturally that we would like, but it does provide handicap access to the waterfront, and that's how we began it. And as I think about it, I want to go back to actually the acquisition of Sinasco. That park was no longer, and talk about going to jail, we'd all go to jail today if we did what we did then. Is anybody related to the Giglios here? If you look at, well, none of the Hudson River shoreline is actually natural, but what's at Sinasco Park right now, if you look at it, it sticks out, goes out like that, it's hardly natural. When the expressway was being built, the village had a front loader, Louis Gate was the operator of that. We just dropped boulders in, little by little, and then filled in behind it, and that's actually how Sinasco Park got built. But we did have, starting with that pedestrian bridge, then there was the topic of the Seprio property, what's now the property that's Croton Landing, and that was owned by the Italianos, and Seprio was Stanley, Emmett, Paul, Robert, Irene Ottaviano. And that was owned for several generations by the Ottaviano family. The Ottaviano were probably one of the biggest construction firms in the state, built the Thruway and the Frogneck Bridge, and there was an asphalt plant there. And later on, the third generation of boys in the 60s decided they were going to have a beer garden there for a little while. But then they saw what was going on in Half Moon Bay, and they thought, well, let's put all condominiums up there. And they were thwarted from doing that by the fact that there wasn't any access to it. So working with the Trust for Public Land and the Open Space Institute, the village acquired that property, and then what did we do? We went on to create access to that property by starting with a program the federal government had to fund Metro North to close dangerous grade crossings. We had, as many of you all know, was the Brook Street grade crossing at the bottom of Brook Street, which went across the railroad tracks out to the waterfront, and that's how you got out there. It took me a long time, all of us, a long time to convince people that you could actually come across the Half Moon Bay Bridge and go all the way down by building a road to that in order to close it. And once the engineers figured out that it could be done, we got substantial funding with Metro North to build that. But there were more projects that all got strung together. If everybody remembers the original bridge, not the original, but the previous bridge that went across the Croton River, in working with the Department of Transportation, we created what is now called the crossing. That is, pedestrians and cyclists can go across that bridge, and that goes all the way down and meets the old Croton Aqueduct, which is now also a state park, and that's how you can go up the Croton Dam or all the way down to New York City. Many of you will remember what it was like trying to get over to Croton Point on the old bridge that went across the arch in Harmon. That was a very, very dangerous bridge, and when that bridge was rebuilt, working with, that's both a county and a Metro North project, we worked with cycleways so that you can cross the Croton River, go over to Croton Point, and on out to the point. It's all, but then if you think about it, there are actually 2 landfills at Croton Point. I think many of you know that. There's a second landfill, which is right behind Discovery Cove, or Half Moon Bay. And working with Westchester County, who owned that property, we created a road to give south access to Half Moon Bay and Discovery Cove. But equally important, we built a trail that goes behind it that you can walk and cycle on. So all part of this is a small part of a larger vision. It's a small part of a larger vision that the village and the part of us had. There's much work to do. There's much work to do. And this all comes down to vision of a village and a park. If you think about it, vision of a village and a park. If you think about it, we have the Croton River protected now, the coastline, Croton River, we protect the Hudson, the coastline. Think about it also of the Hudson. Many of these people think about it also protected with many of these people in this room. The other piece of this slice of the pie, the other piece of this slice of the pie space behind the village. So we really have a circle of space behind the village. So we really have a circle of open space on the village. And I'm looking at that Clearwater T-shirt over here, and I'm looking at that Clearwater T-shirt over here. It all reminds me of what Pete Seeger always said. They'll take care of it. I think all of us. They'll take care of it. I think all of us.
The general of the United Provinces, what is now created their alliance in the mid-1400s to throw off the oppressors occupying your city, imposing foreign rules, in this case, the Spanish. These provinces force access to the open sea, fair trade, and in their practice, were unique in their practice of relatively open religious and cultural tunnels. Does that sound familiar? In the mid-1700s, the United Provinces, what is the Netherlands today, developed a well-established system of self-rule, two chambers, lower house. Sound familiar? The provinces established that a unique set of birth for the rights of citizens. And they did so primarily not out of some governmental heart, but because they viewed these rights as essential in mercantile enterprise. Freedom of assembly, speech, of worship, of publication, and the right to a fair trial is mandatory, fostering the class of people on the middle ground between the wealthiest and the poorest. In short, these basic rights foster the middle class enjoy enough labor that they could buy homes, even early life insurance, and even commission small painting, and even dabble in local finance. Our own Bill of Rights, which we hold dear, is directly derived from the preceding birth that helped New Amsterdam flourish in the 1600s we now know as New York City. The stock exchange took place in the United States as well, boroughs from which we now know we're that collected purchase power, risk taking. I now scroll to the next page. And that collected purchase power and risk sharing of birds existed to raise capital for economic activities such as Hudson's voyage, and to distribute the proceeds of that activity across the investment. In the late 1700s, on this continent started to call the United States, and were eager to toss off the yoke of foreign power and access to free, fair trade. The United States therefore had an immediate bond with the United Province, and found in them secret source of munitions during the war with Britain. After the war, strong financial backing. France, meanwhile, was undergoing its own revolution. And had deep-seeking allies against the British. France was the first nation, importantly, to recognize the United States, largely on a military base, lending aid to transport us to stretch the British supply lines to a breaking point. The United Provinces was the second nation of the United States, on a very different basis than France. by 1782, a diplomatic relations America and Holland included a treaty, not of military alliance, but of amity and commerce. The United States, as a young nation, for its raw materials such as tobacco, but lacked sufficient sailing access to foreign ports. The United Provinces needed product to trade to sell, and market finished goods could deliver plate glass, fine metals. As powerful and advanced as the Dutch Navy was at the time, it ill afford to irritate and aggravate even larger and essential British Union, whose home ports only half-day sails on its coast. Keep in mind that the provinces had to walk a delicate balance, endorsing the former colony, now the United States, because unlike France, provinces were an official ally in the entire American Revolution. So what can we learn from the Dutch today? In many ways, the Dutch have solved some of the issues we now face by encouraging ways of how to avoid urban sprawl and how to make cities more livable and more efficient. Entropy is the habit of nature toward disorder and expansion. When we pop a balloon, the air inside goes out in all directions. When we drop people on a landscape, they tend to spread out, except when they need to cluster for common purposes that only density brings, such as a house of worship or a place of work. We need to find a balance between the density and the entropy for our own region. We can learn from both the success and the limits of the Dutch Republic on how to manage density, and maybe the Dutch can learn from us on how to enable entropy. Thank you very kindly.
In 1963, living in D.C., James Rhodes was forced to make a decision. Continue singing in a folk music trio or go to architecture school. Reason prevailed, and a successful career in historic preservation ensued. Today, Croton's own resident architect turns back to the banjo. Always close to the water, he has written 2 songs inspired by our Hudson. After listening, I'm sure you will agree with me, going to architecture school was the right decision.
The river is a giver. I think we should put this in the tune. What's the difference between a chainsaw and a banjo? You can tune a chainsaw. My river runs great harbor and saw before him this wide, long river. He, or at least his crew, must have said the equivalent of, "Holy Toledo, this is the big one." But the river didn't have a name then, at least not to Henry Hudson. But the river did have a name. The people who lived here had a name for it. It was called Mahiakanduk. Pretty close? The river that flows both ways, or as I say, the river that runs both ways. Oh, the river runs down from Terrytown by the west side out to the bay, where tides run Glenford and back again. Oh, the river runs both ways. Oh, the sailors all work the river and all trading floating to Cobsack Bay, winds left and right, day and night. Their slip sail up and back key. Oh, friend, won't you lend a hand from Troy to the Palisades? We'll sail with the wind and back again. Heaven flows the plain on the river that runs both ways. I live in the wake of the give and the take, every side of life as it seems. Near the eagle and the crane and the shadow train, when sight goes through my reason. Not straight ahead, but a circle instead is a lesson on the river. But you will cast to the wind will return again. Tomorrow and forever. Oh, friend, won't you lend a hand from Troy to the Palisades? We'll sail with the wind and back again. Heaven flows the plain on the river that runs both ways. Progress, we're told, makes dust of the old, advancing day by day. Let the water say no, even time can flow like a river that runs both ways. From a tear in the lake to the ocean's waves, every day they pop and pop. Find life as one as the Hudson runs. Great Mahiakanduk. Oh, friends, won't you lend a hand from Troy to the Palisades? We'll sail on the wind and back again. Heaven flows the plain on the river that runs both ways.
Long time ago, in the 1950s, when my husband and I first got to Croton and lived in the house on Sunset Drive. And he was Italian, and he was just struck by the beauty of Croton and the surroundings, and wrote a book called Croton Elegies, Elegia di Croton. I translated it into English. And so I thought I would read one poem from his book, and then some of mine. Well, this was back in the 1950s, and if you remember, there were a lot of old leftover World War II ships parked up in the river near Peekskill. And he wrote this poem called Western Horizon. Upstream, mountain slopes to sea broad river, and old ships by the hundreds are rusted lineups offshore. Downstream, a gleaming stretch of steel, and Tappan Zee Bridge closes the waters. There, a road is measured with the vertebra quiver of an arched bow that is the continent aiming west. So that was Antonio's poem. And my new little book is this tiny little book called Hudson River Haiku, which I was inspired by the quadricentennial of the discovery and the sailing up of the river by Henry Hudson. My window's vista, high wall of stone and trees, topping dappled tides. Dawn over Palisades, throws deepened purple shadows across Sleek River. Twilight-streaked ripple of palisade staging it, the river is still. By night, the bridge span illumines the Tappan Zee, mirroring itself.
Thank you.